Over-explaining weakens your position. There was a time in my life when I genuinely believed that clarity meant saying everything. Not just the decision, but the actual thinking behind it. Not just the recommendation, but the context, the background, the assumptions, the precautions, the reasoning. I thought that if I explained myself thoroughly, people would understand me better, that they would trust me, and they would see how thoughtful and responsible I was being. And if I'm honest, part of that came from being someone who was used to carrying responsibility early. When you're often the person who gets it right, you learn to explain yourself in advance, so nothing falls apart later. You learn to anticipate issues before they arise. You learn to make things easier for everyone else. So I kept talking. I noticed this pattern most clearly in professional settings, in the meetings, in the planning conversations, moments where decisions were being shaped. I would make a recommendation, and almost immediately, I'd feel this internal pull to keep going. I'd explain how I arrived at the conclusion. I'd walk through the background. I'd preempt questions no one had asked yet. I'd soften my language so it didn't sound too firm or too decisive. And all of this happened after I already said the most important things. What's interesting is that I wasn't unsure. I had done the work. I was prepared. I trusted my judgment. But internally, there was this quiet anxiety running underneath it all. What if I'm misunderstood? What if someone thinks I'm being abrupt? What if clarity is mistaken for arrogance? So instead of letting the point stand, I kept talking. And over time, I noticed something subtle but consistent. The more I explained, the less anchored the room became. People stopped responding to the recommendation itself and started responding to the explanation. Instead of discussing the decision, the conversation had actually shifted to debating the reasoning. The clarity I thought I was creating actually dissolved the point. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. Over-explaining doesn't make people trust you more. It makes them question whether you trust what you're saying. In leadership environments, clarity is not about volume. It's about precision. There's a difference between being thoughtful and being verbose, between being thorough and unintentionally weakening your own position. And that difference often shows up in what you do after you've made your point. I had to learn how to stop talking. Once the point was made, stop talking. That meant sitting in silence, letting the pause exist, resisting the urge to fill the space. At first, that silence is uncomfortable, especially if you're someone who's used to managing conversations, smoothing edges, and making sure everyone feels comfortable. But that silence is not a void. Silence is a signal. It tells people that you are grounded in what you've just said. It tells them the point doesn't need defending. It tells them that you are not asking for permission. Once I started doing that, stating the recommendation and stopping, conversations changed. People either accepted the point or asked for clarification. And when they asked, the conversation became sharper, not softer. So the lessons learned is confidence isn't louder, it's cleaner.